We humans are born with a passion for justice. Wherever you go in the world, or whatever age people you're talking to, from little children to old people, everybody knows, as we say, in their bones, that things ought to be put right. That if something's gone wrong, you can't just leave it, you've got to do something about it. When some terrible murder or other similar atrocity takes place, people in the streets know that something's got to be put right. And if the judge or the jury doesn't do the right thing, there are sometimes either riots or threats or whatever. People know that a balance has got to be brought back to the world. In this book, I begin by talking about that passion for justice, and I suggest that it's not accidental. It's not just that we all want, out of self-interest, to have our own world sorted out, our own lives put back to rights. It isn't just a matter of a survival instinct that as long as I can survive, I'll be all right, therefore I suppose I better let other people survive as well, and we'll get into some sort of contract on this. And it's more to do with the way that things happen in people's lives and between different communities, that there somehow bubbles up from underneath a sense that things have to be put straight, things have to be sorted out. You don't, as I say, have to teach people that. They know it in their bones. Now, over the last many decades, we've seen all kinds of horrible injustice. We know a great deal about the 20th century and all that happened in it, about the First World War and the terrible things that were done then, about the Nazi Holocaust and the awful, unspeakable things that were done then, particularly to the Jewish people, and about many other massacres and terrible things that have happened, and genocide in various parts of the world. And people all over the world say, this is not right, we ought to do something about it. And the funny thing is that we don't seem able to. We've invented very complicated machines for making war, but we're not so good at inventing machines for making peace, let alone for a peace based on justice. We can get people round the table from time to time, and then as soon as they've gone away having signed some deal or saying, well, we now have a way to work forwards, some other incident happens and off they go, and it's tit for tat, and everyone claiming that this is what justice means, and the other side saying, no, this is what it means, and things getting worse and worse. And when you watch that happening down your own street, let alone on the television screens about atrocities around the world, you know that something ought to be done about it. Something ought to be put to rights. How do we explain this sense of justice? Wouldn't it be easier if we all just shrugged our shoulders and said, oh, well, the world's a wicked and cruel place. I'm just going to make sure I'm all right. And if somebody gets in my way, I'll push them out of the way. Wouldn't that be simpler? Well, in some ways it would, but I wouldn't like to live in that sort of world, and I suspect that you wouldn't either. I think we all want to live in a world where justice is sought and preferably where justice is done. But is that just wishful thinking? Is it just, oh well, it would be nice if it was so, so maybe we should invent a God who could make it so? I don't think so. And I think most human beings discover it as a basic core constituent element in their humanness, that they know things ought to be put to rights. But of course the trouble is that at the same time we discover in ourselves that we're not very good at doing it in our own case. When somebody does something wrong to me, I naturally want that to be put to rights. But if I do something wrong to somebody else, I'd be quite happy actually if there was some means of my getting away with it. And that is a puzzle, that we all know that there is such a thing as justice, and yet we fail actually to grasp it and reach at it in our own case. You could put it like this. The ancient Greeks spoke about two philosophers. One of them, whenever he came out of his front door, would see the world and burst into laughter. It was such an uproarious place, so many silly things going on. The other one, when he came out of his front door, burst into tears because it was such a wicked world with so much sorrow and suffering and pain and grief. And those two reactions, laughter and tears, are characteristic of a great deal of human experience. And both of them speak about things being somehow incongruous, things not quite stacking up. We laugh because the world is out of joint and it's hilarious. We cry because the world is out of joint and it's tragic. But both those reactions, which incidentally are characteristically human, computers don't laugh or cry, crocodiles may shed tears but they're not actually sad, and hyenas may appear to laugh but they certainly haven't seen that something funny going on. More likely they've just spotted a nice meal for their lunch or dinner. So it's a human thing that we laugh and we cry, and that deeply human response is a way of saying we know the world is meant to be making sense and being put to rights, but we can't actually manage to get it there just yet. These are natural reactions and they're deeply embedded within us. And one of the things which the Christian faith has always taught is that God, the God who made this world, has this passion for justice, and because we are made in God's image, that's why we have it too. But at that point, somebody's going to come back and say, well, if you Christians say that you believe in justice, you haven't done such a good job of it yourselves, have you? Think about the Crusades, think about the Inquisition, think about all the wickedness that's been done in the name of Jesus. Yes, all of that is true. That's part of the record. And that's important that we should own up to that. We should put our hands up and say, yes, we've got it wrong as well. But it is no part of the Christian claim that the Christian church has always got everything exactly right. On the contrary, one of the prayers that Jesus taught his followers was to say, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Presumably, Jesus thought we were going to need to go on praying that prayer. But you know, there are other sides to that story as well. There are the great moments in Christian history when people did get things gloriously right. Interestingly, at exactly that point in our history, about 200 years ago, when people were saying that Christian faith is just about private spirituality, it's not about public life, at that very point, William Wilberforce in my country and John Woolman in America and some other reformers in other parts of the world were saying, no, because we believe in the God who we see in Jesus, we've got to stop the slave trade. We've got to make it impossible for people to do this dehumanizing thing and pretend that it's legal and upright any longer. And they worked and they prayed to bring that element of Christian faith into the public square. And they succeeded, often against great opposition. So there are some success stories in recent history. Perhaps the most important one is that of Desmond Tutu standing up for justice and for non-violent revolution in southern Africa over against the tyranny of the apartheid regime. And I am proud that I am an Anglican, part of the same church as Desmond Tutu. But I'm much more proud to be a Christian, because it was Christian faith that actually enabled Desmond to confront the power of the world at that point. So the passion for justice goes very deep down into our essential humanness. And we Christians believe that that's because we are made in the image of the God who himself has a passion for justice, and a passion which was acted out in the life and work and death of Jesus of Nazareth. There's another theme about God and about Jesus and about us that's been underground for a long time and is starting to emerge again once more. Think of it like this. Once upon a time there was a powerful dictator who ruled the country according to his iron will. In that country, there were all kinds of springs of water that kept bubbling up all over the place, and they made the roads muddy, and they were inconvenient, and people couldn't always rely on the water being where they wanted it, and so on. So the dictator decided he would pave over the country with concrete, and in doing so, he would channel the springs of water and pipe them to the places where he wanted them to be. Unfortunately, the experiment didn't last for very long, worked okay for a while, but then the bubbling water got the better of the concrete and came pouring out all over the place, so that there was chaos once again, even though the land was refreshed and people had plenty to drink. Now, that's a silly image if you like, but it's a picture of what's been going on in the Western world for the last 200 years. The hidden spring is spirituality, the awareness that all humans have, that they are made for a relationship with someone or something much bigger, much greater than anything that we humans can know by our own will. And yet, many people in the Western world in particular have said over the last 200 years, oh, spirituality, that leads people to do crazy things. All sorts of nonsenses happen when people get religion. They go off and bomb each other, or they get together in fanatical groups and they all go and commit suicide. We can't be doing with that religion. It leads to fanaticism. So we will pave over the ground with concrete, and we will pipe this spirituality thing into little safe places, call them churches if you like, and then those who actually want it can go and get it there, and then that'll be all right and safe. Doesn't last. What's happened in the last generation is that attempt by the European and American Enlightenment to keep religion safe, to say, oh, it's just a matter of private opinion, doesn't have anything to do with public life, with the real world, that attempt has been blown apart by the rediscovery of all sorts of spiritualities, which, yes, have sometimes produced dangerous and damaging and dehumanizing behavior, but have also been deeply refreshing for many people. And people have started to go along with any sort of spirituality that happens to take their fancy. G.K. Chesterton said that when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. And there's been a great deal of anything around for quite a long time now. You only have to read a book like the Da Vinci Code to see that, to see the way in which people are hungry, thirsty for anything that may give them a truth that will help them to make sense of their lives. But of course, many people in our world will still say, well, come on, spirituality is just escapism. It's just a way of getting away from the stresses and strains of modern life, and you might as well take drugs or listen to your favorite music on an iPod or something like that. Just engage in a private world which will make you feel good. Well, yes, I freely grant there may be many kinds of spirituality which have been and are escapist. What is the test, though, for whether something is escapist in that negative sense or not? The test would be whether the person who is indulging in that escapism is actually better fitted to be a full human being, taking her or his part in the real world and enabling other people to live a more fully human life as well. There are some kinds of spirituality which do make people useless in terms of the regular run of human life. We have a phrase for it, a cliche. We talk about people being so heavenly minded that they're no earthly use. But you know, a lot of the people that I know who are really and truly heavenly minded are remarkably useful in the world. I've had the privilege in this week when I'm making this recording to see some young people going straight from a time of prayer and Bible study out with shovels and picks to work at creating a beautiful garden where there was just a pile of rubble, so that people who live on a really poor estate with not much going for them in their lives can have a bit of colour and life, and with that can have a bit of hope. It looks to me as though that kind of spirituality is quite literally of earthly use, and one might even say earthy use. So there are answers to the question, isn't spirituality just escapist? And if people say, well, I've been to the church down the road and they don't seem to me to cut much ice, well, that may be so. There are many churches that have not really got in touch with the living God, who is the source of genuine Christian spirituality. But those who do come through that and out the other side into the real world with a sense of a living God who makes a difference in the real world. Now, of course, there's another thing which is frequently said, and I remember a friend saying to me when I was a teenager, when I was struggling to be a practicing Christian at the age of 15 or 16. A friend said to me, well, it may be true for you, but it's not true for me. And that raises a question which has haunted our world over this last generation, the question of truth. How can we deal with that question? What is true? Is it just true for me? Or can it be true for you as well? The way I regularly address this question is by thinking back to the great picture of God as creator. According to the Bible, according to the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the Muslim tradition, there is a God who made this world and who made everyone within that world. And whether or not they know it, that is in fact the way things are. And it's from then on in the nature of a sort of experiment. Does it make sense that people actually are in the image of this God? Or is that just a pipe dream, another bit of wishful thinking? And again I find, and I've found as a pastor working with Christians and working with many non-Christian people as well, that there are things which resonate in their lives with the truth that we see in Jesus, the truth that we see in what the Bible says about God. And again, they know that they have a passion for justice, and they're puzzled about it. They know that there are hidden dimensions, other depths to human existence, and they're puzzled by that as well. And it's because the story that we Christians tell can make sense of those puzzlements, can start to answer those hungers, and can show us how we can be part of God's way of answering those questions for his world, that the Christian faith has energy to get out there and make its appeal to anyone and everyone in this world today and tomorrow, just as it has for the last 2,000 years.